Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm joined by the magnificent Maverick again. Um,
Hello.
Hello, Maverick. He has his pipe out, so he's ready. His team is winning over on, I think, baseball, was it?
Yep. Yep. The Rangers.
Okie doke. Well, let's hope they win. Because no matter what, since they're playing against an American team is losing.
Mhm.
um, but we're today going to survey um, a great period in sports and art, the Augustan period, um, to an extent, but also Aeneid in Virgil. And this is honestly one of the most interesting topics of the Augustan period because what I find so odd is how few people focus on it. They focus mostly on the administrative political reforms of Augustus, which we're going to do next time. But and I'm not going to bash people who focus on that stuff. It's interesting,
Mhm.
but let's be real. Virgil is so much more interesting. And in terms of literature, he's really the standout guy. The reason I
Yep.
emphasize him is just he's the great man of Augustan art and poetry and literature. Ovid and uh, who else? And all the others are great. But then you get Virgil. You know what I mean? It's like comparing Cicero and Pompey and Caesar. They're all magnificent, but Caesar's greater. Um, and Virgil is one of those really interesting fellows that um, you either know a lot about him or you don't know much about him. And he was born in a rural household, which, let's be honest, almost all great poets and artists seem to come from the countryside, or at least it seems that way to me. I don't know what you think of that statement.
I think it's definitely a trend in the ancient world,
Mm,
specifically in Rome. Almost none of Rome's
yeah.
great artists actually come from the city itself.
Mm, yeah. Also,
Wasn't I don't
like
think
how
Virgil was even born a Roman. This was
born
before Cisalpine Gaul got the franchise.
he was born in Mantua in northern Italy, or Andes,
Mhm.
the village of Andes, Ande, outside Mantua. So he was born in northern Italy to a rural family. Um, they seem to have had a Celtic element to their characters. So, you know, um, there's an old Roman theory that it's the Celts who were the best poets and whatnot. I think they're forgetting that the Greeks were pretty damn amazing too. Um, but if you look at Homer, he came from the countryside. If you look at Chrétien de Troyes in France, he came from the countryside. Charlemagne's best poets and whatnot were country, rural folk. So that's why I'm kind of wondering, is there something in the countryside that tends to feed the artistic, poetic soul? Um, it certainly seems to have fed that of Virgil, who ironically was 7 years older than Augustus. He was born in on October on the 15th of October, uh, 70 BC. Um, and his father apparently was a small landowner or a farmer, and he cultivated bees. And Virgil grew up near the woodlands, so near the forest. And it's what um, inspired his Éclogue and his Georgic, his agricultural and pastoral poems. Um, but Virgil himself was as well educated as Shakespeare seems to have been, if not more so, as he studied rhetoric, philosophy, medicine, and astronomy in Cremona, Milan, and in Rome. And apparently, he had considered a career in law or public life, but he kind of liked breathing, so he decided to turn to poetry because of the civil wars. I'm glad you like that joke. I can see from your face you like that joke. But it's also that I think it seems that Virgil caught the poetic bug early. So while he was skilled in matters of law, astronomy, and all these other things, he took more to poetry. But it's interesting that he was sharp enough to take an interest in all these fields and decide, I'm going into art. Um, Now, he apparently died at the age of 50 in Brundisium. Um, and he he was really um, he was first kind of patronized by Gaius Maecenas, one of the besties of Augustus, and he was one of them that celebrated in his poems and in his works the ideas of pietas, uh, family, agriculture, and imperial destiny. But the thing with the idea of pietas is that too many people say dutifulness or piety, piety, but really it's about all forms of piety: filial, uh, religious, cultural, uh, like just every form of piety you can imagine. That's what it's about. The Romans combined all those sentiments into one single word. Um, and of course, um, Virgil also composed a bunch of other stuff. But the interesting thing is that the patronage money was such that it allowed Virgil to devote himself completely to poetry. So he didn't waste time on a day job or on marketing and stuff. He just set to work on poems, and Augustus basically paid his bills and whatnot. Um, but it seems that from what I've looked up, Augustus and Virgil were actually personal friends after a while. So he seems to have been the luckiest of the poets because not all of them were personal friends of the emperor, but Virgil seems to have struck an easy friendship with the man. Um, Now, in some novelizations and whatnot, Maecenas starts to feel a little annoyed. Augustus kind of treading on his toes and befriending his poet. But I'm not sure how much truth there is to that. Um, but the thing is, um, Virgil is someone who, uh, well, how do I put it? An example of the friendship between him and Augustus is that Augustus liked to have Virgil personally recite um, his works. So Virgil would present parts of the Aeneid, from what I've read up, to the imperial family, reading it himself, which is like, you got to bear in mind, this is the family that rules the world. And he's personally reading his poetry to them and reading whatever else he's composed to them. He's basically the Roman equivalent of a bard and dealing with the Irish king, so to speak. This is how the Irish did it, how the French did it. But the Romans also did it this way. It seems to be in a long-standing tradition across various cultures at the time. But Virgil was also someone who, when he felt ill, whenever he was sick, Augustus would personally intervene. Um, like I said, it seems that Augustus took a very strong personal interest in the man. Um, Not like, I know there's going to be that one gay person who's going to say, "Well, was there gayness?" No, but I have to always preface, because I used to always get someone in the comments who'd be like, "Oh, is it gay?" No, it's not. Um,
No.
Augustus was a womanizer, um, like a ardent womanizer who seduced his female staff of
And
servants.
and Virgil was way too chaste and pious for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Rather infamously so, um, in competition with Ovid's public audacity. Really,
Hmm.
you know, I've got Will Durant in front of me right now, and he describes Virgil as the most lovable of Romans. And if there is one way to put it, that's definitely a very good, concise description of Virgil. Um,
Mm.
when you read his works, be it the epics are just the lesser ones. Just such a gentle guy who doesn't not a hard charging guy like Homer in his poetry.
Hmm.
Just wanted things to be beautiful, wanted things to be good, and if something, as like the Black Knight would say, encroached on wholesomeness, he didn't want any part of it. He wanted things to be wholesome.
Yeah. Yet what's fascinating about his, um, let's get into his great epic, into his magnum opus, is that it's not entirely wholesome. Well, it has its
Nope.
moments, but it's freaking tragic and epic and wondrous. But the most wonderful pieces of literature are not always wholesome, are usually not. Um, there are wholesome episodes, but they usually come with drama and shadows and light conquering the shadows, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I would consider the Lord of the Rings as a whole to be a wholesome story, but Shelob's Lair in particular is a rather unwholesome chapter.
that's what I was
Um,
thinking of.
it's downright dreadful. Um,
Yeah.
the horror
And
of the chapter in the Two Towers,
mhm.
the movie's Shelob's Lair is like that dread is not there.
Mm. I like how Tolkien once described it as what is Lord of the Rings about? He once said death, but he might have
Yeah.
been trolling. He was prone to trolling people. He said
Well,
death. I'm not sure why, but um, like I said, the way he said it, from what I understand, was more like he was teasing the person. But
death
Silmarillion, he
is
said, was
definitely
definitely
a
about death.
yeah, yeah. It's a death is a recurring theme for sure, even if it's not the whole point of the story.
Yeah. With Virgil, I'd argue that death is a huge element in the Aeneid.
Yeah. Well, the story, the catalyst of the story is the great cataclysm of Troy, is the death of Troy.
Yeah.
That's what sends
Yeah.
him on his quest. The death of his wife is what sets up the later dramas. Uh,
Yeah.
Even though in the Greco-Roman world, if somebody other than Virgil was writing the story, uh, you don't have to kill off Aeneas's wife for him to have the romantic relationships later on in the story.
Yeah.
Uh, because especially right before the Augustan moral reforms, Romans were particularly promiscuous. Uh, but because Virgil was Virgil, Aeneas had to be a single guy to then go and
Well,
and Dido had to be a
yeah.
single woman.
It's also that if you look at like Scipio Africanus, the model for most of the heroic ideals of Rome, he was pretty faithful to his wife. So
Uh,
that might have also served as a model. But then you get Augustus, who was, even though he was cheating frequently on Livia, very obviously devoted and dedicated to her. So that might have
uh,
also served as a model. Because Augustus serves as a
yeah,
great model for Aeneas, to the point that some literary historians wonder if his temperament in a few of the chapters of the Aeneid maybe stem from Augustus,
mm,
um, which is a good question. There was clearly a lot of affection and admiration by Virgil
yeah,
towards Augustus. And it's said that Augustus admired Virgil on account of his poetic brilliance. But when it comes to Aeneas, yeah, I do think that only Virgil would make him a single guy because um, Homer, like, we got to bear in mind, Achilles technically isn't even single when he strikes up his affair with one Trojan
no,
girl.
no.
Um, uh, Paris has
With Iliad
had his
starts
freaking
with
affairs
oh yeah, yeah,
before
yeah.
Helen.
Paris, you know,
Um, Menelaus is not even. He's got a side dish, so to speak.
mhm.
Even as he's chasing Helen, like he's trying to get her back. He's already a father of two kids with another woman.
Mhm.
Um, and like I said, the only one in the Homeric epics who, well, like at the start seems kind of devoted to his wife is Odysseus, but he has his affairs throughout the Aegean trying to get back
He
home.
does. But
But
he's always
on the other
trying to
hand,
get home to Penelope.
yeah,
She's
but that
she's
being,
always there.
yeah, but that being said, Cersei, I don't know how much we can count that as an affair because that's a walking disaster. So I'm joking there. Cersei was a disaster, um, but that being said, when you get down to Virgil's vision of things, um, he puts a lot more sentimentality into the marriage than um, Homer and others did with their marriages for their heroes. Um, it's but there is a tradition. Like if you look at the stories of Heracles, he's quite attached to Megara when he slaughters her in that fury sent down by Hera. And
Hmm.
there's always that trace of grief and sorrow in the Heraclean stories about dead past lovers or wives or whatever. So
Hmm.
that's the grief is always a motivating factor for Heracles, who seems to go from who seems to be a serial monogamist, at least in most of the stories I've read of the character, which is a contrast to Achilles, Paris, even Odysseus to an extent. And with Aeneas, he kind of is a serial monogamist, but
Hmm.
his first marriage seems to have been, at least according to the Aeneid, a bit of a love match,
Yep.
um, which is fitting considering his mother's Venus, the goddess of love. And she herself had had an affair with Anchises, who then boasted of having bedded Aphrodite, and Zeus struck him with a lightning bolt, um, which crippled him. Which I know, like, yes, you begged the most beautiful woman in creation, but um, her dad's kind of a dick. Um, I wouldn't go around bragging when her dad's Zeus. Um, that just doesn't seem wise to me.
Hmm.
Um, but so he's a cripple who can't walk, but he has a lot of wisdom. Um,
In his old age.
and yeah, and yeah, in his old age, in his younger days, not so much, as you
Yep.
pointed out.
Yep. We learn.
Um, yeah, we all have to at some point. Some of us lose the usage of our legs before we learn, but at least he learned. Um,
Hmm.
so that's where you get the great image of Aeneas carrying his father and his son and trying to get the hell out of Troy.
Yep.
But his wife kind of hesitates and gets whacked.
And she falls
Um,
behind.
yeah, and Aeneas doesn't really take notice because there's everybody screaming and dying, and
Hmm.
um, he's kind of got his arms full with his father and his son, um, which, while I've seen literary people criticize that why didn't he carry his wife too? He only has two arms, like, um, and I
Well,
have seen
when they
feminist literary folk just bitch about, oh yeah, but he couldn't save his wife, but he saved his father and his son. Figures,
well, okay,
and it's
so
like,
on surface level, you go, okay, yeah, why wouldn't you save your wife over your dad? As you pointed out, his dad's crippled. His son is a
yeah, you can't
boy.
walk.
His wife is a full able, adult.
Yeah,
They were fleeing together. If anything, she is more mobile than he is in that moment.
yeah,
It
she
was just
is.
that she hesitated when he went full bore.
Yeah, and he's
It wasn't that he abandoned her. He
it's
took on everything, and she still fell behind.
and he's also, I think, in some versions carrying the family gods. So he's like
Yes, he
he's
is.
carrying the family
Um,
heirlooms. He's carrying his father. He's carrying his son,
yeah.
and
So
like,
he has his father over his shoulders, his son in one arm, and then the family sacred fire in his hand.
well, sacred gods. like the
What do you?
box with the family heirlooms, and it's like, and he's
Well,
got his son screaming in his ear, and his father
no,
shouting warnings to him and
we
whatnot.
don't
So
do
it's like,
warnings.
yeah, it's like the, the man really could have used a Civic Honda or something.
You know, I
um,
just thought of this. So the Aeneid is like Tolkien said, the Lord of the Rings. He wanted to be a new founding myth for England.
yeah,
The Aeneid was that for Augustan
wrong.
Rome. Um, could Aeneas carrying everything but his wife, doing everything he can, but his wife gets left behind? Could that be like Augustine preserving Rome? It's still great. It's still got all this stuff, but something gets left behind, being
Yeah,
the Republic.
yeah. I
I've
think
never read
that
that.
is what
Probably somebody's already put that out there, but that thought just came to me.
it didn't
Because there's
come
so
to
many
me, but that's
layers of meaning in like every
yeah.
verse of Virgil. Will Durant
Well,
said that for a long time, people like scholars would just open up the Aeneid, point to a line, and quote it, and then just like ponder what Virgil
you
meant
could do
by
that
that line. Yeah, absolutely, you could do that.
because Virgil was the most brilliant poet of the ancient world. Um,
Yeah, he's up
the
there.
man just, oh yeah, he was just utterly brilliant. The Tolkien of Rome, really.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you could just pop it open. I've done that and just pointed out a line and pondered it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's phenomenal. Um, and the, like you could even make the argument, Anchises represents like the kingdom of Rome, because I think it is. The wife represents the republic, and Aeneas represents, I guess you could say, the imperium of
Yeah.
Rome. So you can uh, kind of look at it that way. And I guess the sun, Ascanius, represents maybe the dominion of sorts. That is to say, the period after the Princeps period, which is when Diocletian comes to power and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost make that kind of cultural argument that this is prophesizing the way and chronicling in a way the way Rome's destiny after a fashion. But
Mm-hmm.
that's reading a lot into a single piece of art.
Just that a single moment, a scene.
Yeah.
Another
But,
interesting thing Virgil does at the very, very beginning. It starts, or no, it's not. It starts with the fall of Troy, but when Aeneas is like going through his flashback, recounting his tale, he describes the Trojan horse and how the city fell. Um, Homer sets him not Homer. Virgil sets himself apart from the Greek poetic tradition in Homer because up until this point, the Romans were culturally sensitive towards the Greeks. They saw themselves as better than the Greeks, but culturally behind,
inferior. Mm.
inferior. Yeah, thank you. And Virgil lays out uh, the Greeks are slimy, the Greeks are treacherous. Us Trojans, the Romans in the story, are good, honest men that trust people and take people at their word. Um, we're moving away from the Greeks. This is the Roman story now. Um, he's also pulling the Roman culture away from the East and trying to make it its own thing
I'll
with Augustus
be
as
honest.
his new head.
Yeah, I'm a Grecophile, so I love the Greeks.
I am
I've
too.
met a few.
I prefer the Greeks.
I've met a few. I actually think they're some of the most honest people on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly enough, but they're
Got
they're
no
massively
discount.
clever. They're so clever. Um, like like I have I've been tested for an IQ of 144 or 145, but I'm always impressed by the IQ of the Greeks. Even their women are very intelligent. Like they're profound thinkers, even today. Because like, but we have to say that. But the funny thing is, yes, the Greeks are not presented well. in the
No,
Aeneid.
they're not. And it's
Um,
very intentional. Like there's no
hmm,
subtlety about that. It's the Greeks are slimy traders, and us Romans are better than them. Let's stop worrying about what they think, and let's have our own thing now.
but
Because this
what's
is
interesting is what's also fascinating is
go
the
ahead.
Greeks take to the Aeneid in later
Hmm.
centuries. They love it.
Well,
And
you see that in their even their historians like Arrian, who I love for the campaigns of Alexander. He's writing in a time under the Roman Empire as a Greek, and he clearly likes living in the Roman Empire. So
hmm,
so
yeah,
Virgil's mission of making Roman culture the top, the pinnacle, worked. You know,
hmm.
the Greeks culturally submitted, I don't know if because of Virgil, but he definitely had a big part in it, to Rome, and
There's
Rome's culture became supreme.
there's something that historians of the Byzantine period of Greece tend to tell everyone online, and this is something I will actually say. I think they're right. Is that Roman and Greek culture after Virgil fused together?
Hmm.
Like there was a fusion of the two, and you got what came after. And I think, yeah, that happened. But it took Virgil to say we're distinct. We are not going to be inferior. We're not going to have this inferiority complex anymore. We're your equal, not your um, not your inferior. And weirdly, the Greek cultural scene seems to have said, "Finally, you stepped up, lad." You know what I mean? Like, finally,
Yeah.
you're finally stepping up and matching us. Good on you,
Uh-huh.
man. So, but I imagine at the time the Greeks were insulted, but
Yeah.
in Virgil's time. But Augustus, um, who was fluent in Greek, was very intent on trying to make sure Latin and Latin culture was the equal of Greece. Um, was keen on the Aeneid because, well, he's trying to assert that Rome is the equal of Greece. How can you freaking do that if there's that inferiority complex and no one's matching Homer and whatnot? The great
Hmm.
um, artist, the great poet of Greece. And there's a lot of other great Greek poems. I'm looking at reading them down the road, the Nautica, or whatever it's called, where it's the epic poem about the Argonauts. I really want to read
The
that at some
Argonautica.
point. Yeah. Um, and I'm hoping to get
Who was
myself a
that? That
French copy.
was um, Apollonius, right? Apollonius did the
I think
Argonautica.
it was. And I've read a few lines in it. I love it, but
Hmm.
I got to read the whole damn thing. But you look at poems like that and the Odyssey and the Iliad, they're brilliant works. What
Hmm.
can match that? And that was Virgil's self-appointed mission, um, to give to Rome their Argonautica, their Iliad, their Odyssey. And um, what's also great is that um, in book four we get to, I guess, the juicy part for um, lovers of romance. Um,
Yep.
Aeneas arrives in Carthage and meets Dido. Um, Now, a lot of uh, schmucks in the literary criticism scene, I call them schmucks. I don't have a very high regard, hold them in a very high regard, because they tend to take the stance that Virgil is publicly, in poetic fashion, humiliating Carthage and boiling down the rivalry between Carthage and Rome to a woman scorned. Um, with like it's basically about like the rivalry, which was about economics and power and whatnot, um, gets turned into just a rejected woman. Which, yes and no, but I would argue this is a much more interesting and fascinating reason to be enemies than Carthage is just uh, sacrificing their kids and uh, trading everything that's not bolted down for money.
Hmm.
Um, Really, the conflict boiled down to a civilization of capitalism after a fashion, versus an imperialistic power, which wanted to assert its military dominance over, its sense of empire without end. Um, like I said, you have a merchant empire which just wants to trade, versus the imperialist power that wants to rule. That's what it boiled down to. But then you throw in the fact that the Romans were sensitive about um, the whole human sacrifice thing. They weren't really on board with that. And
Nope.
Carthage, which very obviously practiced it. But the thing with the Dido story is that it's a much more censored, much more cleaned up story
Hmm.
than what the alternative would be. Although I'm surprised that there are people who've written novels of this part of the Aeneid. I read a few, and they never ever touched the child sacrifice thing. When that'd be such a great piece of drama between Aeneas and Dido, with Aeneas
It
going,
would be.
"What the hell, woman? Like,
Yeah. Oh, wait
you want
just
to
a
do
minute.
what?
What are y'all doing?
Oh, we have a dog. The puppy's wanting
One of my neighbor's
attention.
dogs. No, I don't have dogs. They're
Uh,
over there. They're like half an acre that way. I'm surprised
uh,
you could hear them. I couldn't even hear them. Um,
okay, I thought.
there, I I had a dog, and then when I moved, um, while my wife was still in school, she became my mom's
Mhm.
dog. I never got her back. So
Ah,
so she's with my mom. I have two cats now. Four kids is enough. Adding a dog to that, not the time right now. That'd be fun one day though. You know,
Whereas I'm hoping to
with
get my dog back.
trying to get yours back, yeah, that's how I felt before I was married and had kids as well. I just wanted my dog back. She's still alive. I see her all the time because I live right down the road from my mom now. She's
Okay,
good.
well, I live in the Atlantic Ocean away, so I need to get my
Yeah,
dog back. Um,
yeah.
but I think um, actually, that's what's missing from the Aeneid: a dog, a faithful companion.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Is there
then
is
again, it's
is there a time in Greek literature when there is an animal companion?
let me look that up.
I'm trying to
Um,
the one, of course, for me, the one that comes to mind is Bucephalus and Alexander, but that was real. That's not literary.
I know that there's Odysseus's dog who dies right after
Oh,
Odysseus
that's right.
returns,
But he's not
which
like
is just
on the journey with him. But
no, but
yes,
that's a journey. That's a story that always rips my freaking heart out,
yeah.
especially these days. There is one anonymous uh, epigram about at a dog's grave, um, where the person said, "Stranger by the roadside, side, do not smile. When you see this grave, though it is only a dog's, my master wept when I died, and his own, with his own hand laid me in the earth and wrote these lines on my tomb." Um, and you get like these are that's a Greek who wrote that, and you of course get a few touching um, like you get the epitaph for a dog named Patricius, where the Roman said, "I am in tears while carrying you to your last resting place. As much as I rejoiced when bringing you home, my eyes were wet with tears. Our little dog, never again shall thou give me 1,000 kisses. Never canst thou be contentedly in my lap. In thy qualities sagacious thou wert, like a human being. Ah me, what a loved companion have we lost." Dogs were beloved by the Greeks and the Romans.
Yeah.
Um, and arguably here in France, people are very overprotective of their dogs. You're not allowed to
Oh
pet them
yeah.
without permission, and people just
Uh-huh.
adore them. I have to admit, it irritates me sometimes because I just want to, when I see a dog, I just want to spoil them rotten, regardless. So I keep getting scolded by a lot of French people. But in Quebec and mini Quebec, our culture is just you see a dog, you spoil him. And well, what if he's one who tends to bite? Well, you'll find out in a minute.
Yeah.
That's the mentality. We just we love our dogs too much. Um, but um, that being said, the Dido affair is one that is um, the least wholesome element of the
Yeah,
Aeneid.
yeah.
Um, Aeneas, it's interesting because Dido is struck by, I think, the arrow of Eros, um, but Aeneas just naturally falls in love with her.
Hmm.
And it's um, an affair that quickly turns wrong as Dido is someone who makes a great lover, but not a good mother, one could say, because she's a little emotionally unstable. Um, because she thinks, well, just settle down here in northern Africa. But Aeneas is informed his destiny lies to the north, not in Africa. And trying to explain this to Dido doesn't work out very well. So he has to set sail, and Dido decides to kill herself. Um, and she's cremated, but with her last breaths, she curses Aeneas and tells and his Trojan heroes, and tells her people to keep them as enemies, keep the descendants of Aeneas as enemies. So, needless to say, she doesn't take the breakup very well. Um, and I will actually go so far as to say we would not see a woman presented like this in this manner until Milady from Les Trois Mousquetaires by Dumas and Auguste Maquet, where a woman is not like women are not always presented very well. I mean, you have Guthrun from the Norse myths, who's a villain, who's a witch, who you know
Hmm.
needs a love potion to Sigurdur and turns him against Brunhilde. But outside that, we don't really see women portrayed as negatively in a way up until Milady. And I know people might say, "Oh, Dido's not that negatively presented to an extent, but she's still." Um, I'm minding my language because this is streaming on YouTube, but she's a bit of a jerk, to put it lightly. She,
Hmm.
like I said, I understand her perspective, but on the other hand, Aeneas does not want to leave. This is a matter of duty. And we have to bear in mind in the ancient world, duty was everything. And um, the sense of duty and obligation that Aeneas feels is why his heart is being torn asunder. Because in the ancient world, love wasn't just a Hollywood la di la di da di da affair. Love was passion. It's something that suddenly struck and could bring about endless turmoil. And um, it could destroy entire empires. This was the belief of the ancient medieval world that it is far more powerful than your individual will and desires. It strikes and it can tear you apart. It is dangerous, but it can be beautiful. But like just be careful. So the sense of their mentality about love is very different than what moderns think of it. Um, because the modern idea of love is a prepackaged thing sold in stores, I guess you'd say. The ancient concept of it is very different. And Dido's and Aeneas's love is the ancient world's love. Passionate and fierce, but it turns to turmoil relatively quickly.
With this, the Dido affair, I consider the setup to it to be one of the biggest and most in your face foreshadowing in all literature. Because not only do we read it, it's also presented as Aeneas' dialogue to Dido when he's
Mm.
describing his journey from Troy to Thrace. That doesn't work out. So he goes to Crete, and that doesn't work out. And then he finally gets to Carthage, and he knows this is not where he's supposed to be. Apollo just had to straight up tell him, "You're supposed to go to Italy." He tried
Yeah.
giving him hints through oracles, and then he's like, "Nuh-uh, you're going to Italy." So in their very first interaction, Aeneas is telling Dido, everywhere I go that's not Italy, something at least weird and sometimes tragic happens that makes me
Mhm.
leave. It's setting up him leaving, the ultimate tragedy for Dido. Um, I think the driving force behind Aeneas, like you said, is duty. It's like a divine mission, literally because Apollo is pushing him on. Venus is pushing him on. They're giving him this quest and giving him this goal. It's like what the Romans would have seen about themselves, where they have this manifest destiny to, be the best, to conquer, to be number one, even at the expense of other people around them. Uh, that all is told in the Dido affair because Rome and Carthage, before the Punic Wars, were allied against Pyrrhus.
Mhm.
They had an early um, like symbiotic
Arrangement. Ah, he froze.
relationship in the
Mel.
Mediterranean. Yeah,
Mm.
did I go out?
You just froze for a minute,
Can you hear me?
but the overall idea was communicated. Yeah,
Okay, we're
and
good.
yeah,
Okay,
but
cool.
it's interesting that um, Aeneas gives her warnings, but he
Yeah,
himself is warned. No, like they're basically told, "Don't fall in love." And what do?
they do. I
Yeah.
wonder. It's kind of like a cliche now because a storm is what pushes them into a cave by themselves. We would see
Hmm.
that in like a modern rom com and like roll our eyes. 2,000 years ago, was that a convention, or is this like a Virgil comes up with?
Virgil.
I'll make it,
He
and it's
set
been
up the
used ever
trope.
since then. Yep, yep. He set
He
it
set
up.
up the trope, but
Yeah,
he,
yeah.
but with it in now it's his mom who helps, I think, set up the incident. But the trouble is for this story is that the trope goes awfully wrong. Like we cannot stress enough.
Uh-huh.
This is a disaster. Um,
Well, the
just
the kind of
like my
strange
past few
thing.
relationships.
Oh no! I hope it wasn't like this. Um, the kind of strange thing is that Dido considers their their the marital act between them as a marriage itself. Um,
Hmm.
and Aeneas goes along with it, even though he knows that's not what it is. Um,
Hmm.
it's almost like he's like the guy that can't tell his girlfriend no because he doesn't want to hurt her
Yep,
feelings or deal with the
that's
backlash.
exactly that's exactly what he is.
Yeah,
He doesn't
yeah.
want to hurt her feelings,
Nope.
and
And then he hits her with the
he
Irish
does.
goodbye, and she kills herself over it. Again,
What he also
you know.
what he also does is um, we see here also. I'm gonna say something a little weird. He's the more vulnerable one because his wife died. He's still in grief over that, and arguably, like I said, like Odysseus, he's the vulnerable one. And yeah, I know a lot of people will point out Dido's a widow, but she's been widowed for longer. Uh,
Mhm.
Aeneas,
He also has a city.
yeah, and Dido's marriage was not one of love like Aeneas's was. So it's a weird case where the guy is actually in the more vulnerable position and is wanting home. And but that being said, yes, he gives her the Irish goodbye, and she kills herself, curses him. You know the works, what every ex does. But then misfortune hits Aeneas on call. Um, as we get um, Anchises, who dies um, en route to Italy, and Aeneas is. um, decides to consult the Sibyl, a oracle of Apollo, and decides to go down into the underworld because he misses his dad and he doesn't feel he's able to do this without him. It seems that he was always reliant on his dad for decision making and for guidance and whatnot. And when his father dies, Aeneas, who has lost his wife, has destroyed himself by breaking up with Dido, now loses his anchor in a way and decides, okay, I'm going down to the into the underworld. I want to see dad. And he himself is a father, but it seems like he's utterly a basket case. It just needs he just wants to see dad. Which, hey, if there was a way into the underworld and back and whatnot to see your father, I would totally do that. So not going to judge, but he ends up getting a vision. Well, first off, when he's going through the underworld, he goes through uh, some fields where he meets Dido's shade, who coldly rejects him when he approaches. So that must have felt great.
Yeah.
He goes through the fields of warriors, Tartarus, and ends up in Elysium where he reunites with his dad, who then reveals to him the great destiny that awaits Rome. Um, so he gets to see Romulus, kings, Republican heroes, and it culminates in, of course, Augustus,
Yep. He's
which,
active.
yeah, that's Virgil obviously geeking out over his friend, who must have loved that part.
Yeah.
um, because one thing that people forget is Augustus always had a sense of his own destiny. You know what I mean? Like he always seems to have believed that he would be the one to save Rome and resurrect her from
Hmm.
the mire. And Virgil seems to have fed into that belief with his poems and his stories. But here you get Aeneas, who's, like I said, this broken man who, like it seems like throughout the story he keeps doubting his own destiny. You know what I mean? Like he's constantly told, "You're going to go found a great city, and that's later going to found Rome." You got to get to Italy. Yeah, but I don't want to. He's like, I don't
Yeah.
want to, and it's here that he's shown. Um, it's like that scene in I think it's the Prince of Egypt, where through heaven's eyes, the song where it's like, how can you possibly understand your own destiny if you only see the one thread? Like you're just a small piece of a larger tapestry, but you are
Hmm.
necessary. And it's here that he's shown, the fullness of his destiny, and he realizes, holy crap, yeah, I actually have to do this. Like, there's no one else, and this is necessary. This must come to be. And it's just such a fascinating episode. At least I think it's fascinating because
Hmm.
um, before he was moved by, pietas towards his wife, towards Dido, towards his mom, Aphrodite, who clearly wants to try to please because that's his mother, and, towards his father, of course. But now it seems like filial piety turns towards the future generations. Like my
Hmm.
children's children, whatnot, have to get this. They have to inherit this. I must make sure this comes to pass, and I must give this to them, which is a fascinating um, turn of the wheel, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like before this, it was always filial duty towards one's ancestors, towards mom and dad, towards yeah, to an extent, the son, but like to the immediate family circle. Now it becomes filial piety towards future generations,
Hmm.
and it's about civilizational duty, societal duty in a way.
Yep.
Um, and I would argue. Shiz is telling his son, "You can't be a little boy anymore." You know what I mean? Like, my time is done. No, I'm your dad, but my time is done. You need to be the man of the household now. You are now the head of the family. And that's the thing. Although the story is about Aeneas, Anshiz was still head of the family in a way because he was still alive. It's, the pater familias. The eldest male in the family is the head of the family. But when
Yep.
Anshiz dies, Aeneas is now the pater familias. He's now head of the family. But the trouble is he's been rejecting, you know, he's trying to reject his duty in a way because he's lost. He loves his dad. This is where it
Yeah.
gets, like, this is the most wholesome element of the Aeneid. I think Black Knight this is probably his favorite part because it must be because it's so wholesome. But
Yeah.
Aeneas finally decides, to step up. And I remember, I forget which literary critic once said that Aeneas begins the story as Odysseus, and and the thing is, he has to reforge himself into a new Achilles in order to give to his people the home they desperately need and want,
Yeah.
which I love
You know,
that.
bringing up Achilles is another thing that really sets a certain aspect
Mhm.
of the Aeneid and the Roman mind contrasting to the Greek is that when Odysseus goes to the underworld in the Odyssey, it's kind of this haze of meandering souls, and they can only speak to him one at a time. And he meets the shade of Achilles, and Achilles said that essentially the glory wasn't worth it. He'd rather be a nobody farmer than a dead somebody, uh, which is very interesting when you consider that later Greeks pretty much turned Homer into the basis of their culture, of their society, especially
Mhm.
the Macedonians, and they seem to forget that part of the Odyssey that
They do.
Achilles tells Odysseus, "Hey, it was not what we did was not worth it." Um, he kind of had after dying, he had that Samwise moment when he had the ring on, and he envisions Mordor as a great giant garden, and he thinks, "What's the point of all this if I don't do it with my own hands?" He rejects the glory to be, a nobody. To be a
Yeah.
good person, to live a good life. But when
And
you go to Virgil's afterlife, he has kind of like a proto-Christian notion of it, which I think is why the medievals loved Virgil so much and why Dante really latched onto him. Because you have we now call them the sinners in, torment. You have a cleansing purgatory, and then just heaven, where he meets his dad. And
mm,
in that heaven, his dad shows him epic battles and conquest and the glory and says, "You got to go get this. You got to secure the glory for our people, in future generations." uh that to me is really one of the like defining characteristics between, if not broader Greek and Roman culture, the high-minded intellectual culture
but I
between the two.
yeah, and I think the difference between Aeneas and Achilles must be emphasized. Achilles, it was personal glory.
Yeah.
Aeneas, it's about the glory of his people and of his children's children. So one
Hmm.
is noble, because I don't think you can describe it as anything less than noble. Whereas
No.
Achilles, it's a selfish glory,
Yeah.
um, because it's rooted in suffering, um, and it it brought unbelief upon the Achaeans. But look at what he did. He killed Hector, who's the nicest guy in Rome, in Troy.
Yeah.
He
The
caused
greatest man
years.
ever.
Yeah, he caused so much suffering for the Trojans, and for what? 'Cause, for his name. But
Hmm.
a name could well be forged without such cruelty. Um, and Neoptolemus, we have to bear in mind, Achilles' son, kills Astyanax, the baby of Hector, or the child,
Yep.
the son, and and kills Priam,
Yep.
uh, and rapes Hector's wife. So, like,
Yeah.
the legacy of Achilles is one of darkness and cruelty, and Aeneas's legacy is one of a peaceful city. So it's, the contrast could not be greater, as you pointed out.
Mhm.
But I also think that the idea of pietas, of duty unto, a sense of filial obligation to others and around you in that and will come after you, is something the medievals really like. And I was going to comment, here in France, you can always usually find a copy of Homer wherever, in a lot of bookstores. He sells really well, but it has taken
Yeah.
me almost 10 years to find a copy in French speaking Canada and in France of Virgil's Aeneid. I finally have a copy for about €4 or something, or €7. But the
Yeah.
thing is, it took me 10 years of searching, because online, it's in French, it sells for like $90 sometimes. Um,
Oof.
it's Virgil is one of the most, like, his Aeneid is one of the most expensive and difficult to find online in the
Huh.
Francosphere. In person,
Yeah.
you have to really search from bookstore to bookstore. And I've been to bookstores across several major cities. They never have a copy. I found it ironically in my local one, where it was
Oh, good.
forgotten, but I grabbed it and it was like, "You're not." Even when scanning it, I would not let it go. And the lady, like,
Yeah.
I have to, I
Yeah.
have to take it. I'm not letting it go. I've searched for this almost my entire life. You are not taking from me. Can I just
Yeah.
scan it? Okay. It's just, and then she just laughed at me, and I told her, "Do you have any idea how hard to find this is?" No, I bought my copy 30 years ago. Well, it's become impossible to find. And the thing is, in from what she told me, and another bookstore seller once told me, this is one of the top 10 best-selling books in France and Quebec, if not one of the
Oh.
top five. Virgil
Oh.
is so popularly read. He's even read in. I remember as a child, we had to read passages of the Aeneid in my
Yeah.
French elementary school boy days, and they still do that. Actually, I think they brought in even more of him into the, you know, and so to understand the French mind, you must read Roland and the Aeneid, in my view, because
Mhm.
Aeneas is considered by the French the prototypical French hero. Interestingly enough, from what I've spoken with other French people, Aeneas is more well known in some ways, and Virgil's more well known than Homer. And it's a contrast to the Anglosphere, where Homer is the more popular one. And
Yeah, for sure.
it's interesting because I've spoken with some French women here, like, in courting and whatnot, and Homer is not the one you mentioned. It's Virgil. Virgil and his Aeneas is are the idealized ones. Um, whereas, like, it's just an interesting cultural contrast where,
Hmm.
like, when I speak with English friends, I like Arcadian, but he's asked me recently, how is England more urban in focus than rural? But there's also, in terms of ethos, a different vision of the world. And I would argue Anglos are more urban, going back to the medieval age and whatnot. The cities were the main centers. And England, what got it, its economy was based on trade and whatnot over that of agriculture
Yeah.
and whatnot. Whereas Scotland and France and Ireland were much more pastoral and much more, like, in France, attacking the cities did nothing in the Hundred Years' War. Attacking the countryside was the thing that sparked panic in the French, especially the French nobility who were dependent on it. Whereas attacking the countryside in England was like, whatever, that's Tuesday. Whereas attacking the
Yeah.
cities and taking the cities was the important thing. So it you also have the English elites who have always liked Homer. The French elites have always liked Virgil. So there's a difference in vision of the world and whatnot. And it also comes down to, um, interestingly, I think, um, what's more is that when speaking with some of the Franks here, and speaking with Anglophones and Americans and the English, previously before I came to France, the English will, like, English speakers. I find, what's very interesting to me is, um, are admirers of Alexander the Great, whereas the French are admirers of Caesar. Um, so that, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like English culture has drawn itself as, like, in a way from, the Macedonians, and from, as an attempted spiritual heir to Alex, whereas the French have envisioned themselves as the spiritual heir in a way to Caesar and to Augustus and whatnot. Like I said, there's a difference in vision of the world here. And I think it's just fascinating, the contrast. And now I know a lot of people will say Western civilization, not knowing that that's talking about one civilization, not a multitude. But this is
Mm-hmm.
an example of two, civilizations looking at some, like this, literature that almost has the same source, but taking a different epic and building themselves around it. Like the English built themselves around, like, the Iliad, while the French built themselves around the Aeneid as a basis for their entire civilizations and whatnot, and their entire being. Now, the Irish and the
That's
Scots
an
built
interesting
themselves around
thought.
what?
You know, we if we take, I wonder how far we can really take this. For another time, but just to
Yeah.
to prime it, you go, okay, so Anglo culture is Bible plus Iliad, and French culture is Bible plus Aeneid.
Yep.
That's a thought that we can try to advance.
Pursue them.
Um,
Yeah, down the road.
so
It's fascinating, isn't
I
it?
know I know it is very fascinating. And so now we're kind of getting to the middle, you know.
Mhm.
But for me, it's kind of the like you hit the midpoint of the Aeneid, and it's like we're at the end now,
Yes.
because all the drama takes place in the first six books, and then the last
Mm,
six books are, I think it's a little too drawn out.
I
I know I
agree.
see what he was doing, poetically, trying to do what Homer did, but in one volume that's half the length of a single volume of Homer's. The Iliad and the
Mm,
Odyssey, and he flips it so he does the Odyssey first, then the Iliad second. Uh, I think he was stretching the the last act of the story into that whole half poem structure the way he
mm.
wanted it to be. Uh, I do find it strange. What's his? I have it right in front of me. I just got to find his name. Um,
Ascanius?
his opponent's name, in Italy. He gets there, so he
Turnus.
yeah, Turnus. That's right. I've got it right here. Turnus. I feel kind of bad for the guy because he was betrothed, um to his
Lavinia.
Latina, yeah,
I
Lavinia,
thought it was
and then
Lavinia.
Aeneas shows up and takes that from him. Uh,
Mm,
and Turnus is like, he seems like a pretty like honest guy, like just a simple like stereotypical warrior, you know, honor guy. And they go through the battles, which I do think Homer does battles better than Virgil did. Um,
mm.
I think Virgil was a
Yeah.
little too soft to do great battle scenes. Uh,
Mm,
Homer Homer really had battles down. Uh,
mm.
but
I mean, I was gonna
he
just add.
yeah,
I was only gonna add the entire Turnus thing is Lavinia's mother's fault.
yes,
Amata. She's the one who Latinus's wife Amata decides, nah, she steers up the Latins and the Rutulians against um, uh, Aeneas and his Trojans, and despite her husband receiving them in a hospitable manner and deciding I want to marry my daughter to Aeneas, his wife is the one who says no. She's basically the evil
that's
mother-in-law.
right. Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's right. There's another
So it's
trope.
not Turnus's fault exactly. Like
Oh,
it kind of is, but
I don't see him at fault.
it's Amada's fault. And that's the thing we got to bear in mind, lads. It's always the woman's fault. There's your red pill for the day. I'm joking. I'm joking. Dear heavens.
Yes.
Uh, but
Can you hear me?
Amada, yeah, Amada's the one who causes the entire um,
Uh,
mess. And like, she doesn't really seem to have too much of a motive other than she doesn't like these guys. And I would argue it's kind of the mother in law going, yeah, but he doesn't have a job right now or a house. You can do better, honey. You can go for the Turnus down the road. He's a much better match for you. Yeah, but Dad and Lavinia clearly want Aeneas.
uh-huh.
Uh, I'll just tell Turnus I'll just tell him whatever to get him against these guys. It's like, you know, I once had a friend, I think it was my Japanese friend, who said in response to this part of the story, the whole thing would have been resolved had Latinus just slapped his wife. It's just, he just said, you just need to slap your wife once. That's it. And she listens. No, this guy was single. So, like, and he had never hit a woman, but uh, he just liked these jokes, these really bad jokes. And he just simply said the whole thing would have been resolved in one go. Just slap her once. She knows she can't around, and. But yeah, this guy was a blowhard. I still love the guy. He's my best friend, but he
Yeah.
just loves this sense of humor of like. But the thing is, I don't think slapping Amada would have resolved anything because she was going to do what she was going to do no matter what. Um,
Well,
and
that's one of the things about the Aeneid when comparing it to the Iliad is that in the Iliad the gods can come in, they can intervene, they can steer characters this way and that. In the Aeneid, the gods are like the driving force. It's
mm,
it's what they say goes. Uh, Hera forces, or I sorry, Juno, uh, is really what shipwrecks him on Carthage. Um, Venus sends Cupid to make Dido fall fatally
fall
in
in
love
love.
with Aeneas. Apollo. Uh, Hold on, I had a bookmark. Aeneas
There's
even says, um, "Cease then to
mhm.
consume thyself and me with these complaints. Not of my own will do I seek Italy." So Apollo is the one that's willing him to go to Italy, and not himself. At least that's what he says to Dido. Uh, and
And
he goes to the afterlife and he sees all that. It's like he's driven by forces outside of himself.
he's
Whereas in the
resisting them.
Iliad, and he's resisting them. Where in the Iliad, there's these characters that can and cannot be steered. Some of them go with it, some of them don't. The
No,
gods are a lot more like kind of funny in a way.
mm,
They're a lot more human in the Iliad and the Odyssey than they are in the Aeneid.
yeah, and Actually, I'll say one thing. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but Paul, Apostle of Christ, has a great
No, I haven't.
line in there. Well, in there, it's about Paul's last days before he's executed. It's the best Christian movie I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Um, and St. Paul in there, at one point, he's told, like, we need your guidance by St. Luke. St. Luke's telling him, we need your guidance. We need you to tell us what to do. And he says, how could I tell you
Mhm.
what to do when, I've tried to go left, Christ has driven me right. I try to go right, Christ has driven me left. He's like,
Yeah.
um, he's like, I have no control over I've never had any control over my life since that day. And he often will say in the movie, that day, like to refer to when, Christ first appeared to him and
On
told him,
on the road to
Paul,
Damascus.
Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And he's like, I've
Yeah.
not had any control here. So but here's the thing: the way he talks, it's almost like a reference to Aeneas, and there's really a strong sense of divine mission and intervention wherever Paul went in his life, and it's a beautiful movie. It's one I would love to do a podcast with you on, but
I'll have
that's
to
for
watch it
another time.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, but the the thing with these last few books, the I I will actually say something weird. I think it's a shame we've not gotten an entire web comic or novel just on this part. I find it just, yeah, these should have been two separate stories, but it is such an exciting
It
part. I
is.
think still, just for the drama, like like I said, I like that. It's just one really bad mother-in-law, but on top of that, Ascanius
Yeah.
kills a pet stag, and it's such a trivial incident, but Latinus withdraws, armies gather, and suddenly everything is spiraling towards disaster. And of course, Aeneas tries to seek allies, first from King Evander from Palatium, um, and this is from the future near the future site of Rome. And Evander agrees to help and sends his son Pallas to Aeneas as a companion in arms. And of course, what's interesting is how in Homer's stories, um, the uh, arguably divine favor was more on the side of the Greeks in some ways. In some ways, but
Mhm.
now it's more on the side of the Trojans with Vulcan forging armor for Aeneas, so and along with a shield. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because it was Achilles who had the perks of divine armor and such in the Iliad. Now it's Aeneas who gets to uh, have that stuff. And
Mhm.
of course, the shield has uh, uh, depicts future Roman events like the Battle of Actium, because of course Virgil has to showboat Augustus. And I've seen someone say, because we must never forget this is propaganda. Yes and no, but I think that saying it's propaganda forgets just Virgil was him and Augustus were personal friends. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you're weaving your best friend into the poem. Yes, there's a political
Yeah.
element because this is his patron. It's his job to propagandize for him. But what separates the Augustus Virgil relationship from other uh, patron and artist relationships later in history is the personal emotional element between these two men. Um, and of course, you have while Aeneas is away, Turnus attacks the Trojan camp, and there's a night raid for glory and to reach Aeneas. But the ones who try to do that are slain, and Turnus um, is forced to retreat, with Juno sending aid to Turnus. Um, so yeah, this that's book 9, and you have book 10 where Turnus kills young Pallas in single combat, and this is a reflection of, in a way, the death of Patroclus. Um,
Mhm.
it seems to mirror it. But Aeneas is horrified and enraged by this act of murder, which um, is killing in battle. So it's not murder. So I should reword that. Um, but Turnus does end up. Um, we have to bear in mind being a bit of a douche in that he does take the belt and does
Well,
proclaim glory for having killed Pallas.
like a
And
classical hero, he has to loot his
yep,
kills.
yep. And Aeneas proceeds to go on a rampage against his enemies, I should say. Now, there's a truce, of course, and um, what's interesting is that um, the, it seems like both sides are kind of like, okay, we both kind of goofed up here. Let's bury
Yeah.
the dead. It's the warrior maiden Camilla, who, which funny fact, very popular name here in France, Camilla. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I could go down the street and shout Camilla, Camilla, and I'll probably have like 2, 3 women poke their heads out. I'm serious. It's one of the most common names out here, um, and every city, when teaching, I have about 3 Camillas per class at
Oh,
every
okay.
age group in every school. So it's like I've known one teacher. It was funny because she recently, well, she, ended up yelling at one Camilla, and you had like 2, 3 girls in her class perking their heads up, and one of
Yeah.
them just almost bursting into tears, going, "I didn't do anything." And like, no, no, not you, dear. The other Camilla. It's like they always have to do that. It's one of the most common names here. Um, but she ends up fighting and is killed by Aruns. And of course, Camilla is um, kind of presented almost like an Amazon, but like I said, probably one of the top most popular female names here in France. Um,
Mhm.
and I will actually also have to say one thing too, because there's always a black pillar in the comment section to any conversation of Europe. No, we are not a majority Muslim country. Um, they're a big minority. France is still 83% French. So, like, please don't leave a comment saying, Aisha or something is most common child name for girls. No, it's probably Camilla, Julie, and Jeanne, which are the most common names. And for boys' names, trust me, I've got like, it's always Alexandre, Gilles, and Charles. Alexander, Julius, and Charles, which are the most common
Nice.
boys' names. I
Nice.
only, yeah, I only say this because I get tired of, like every essay or post or anything I do about France or Europe, I always have to say, no, no, I'm living here. That's not the most common, Mohammed, Aisha, these are
Yeah.
not the most common names. It's actually, and, just having to make, like I'm prefacing because I'm going to get those comments in the chat or in the
Yeah.
comment section. It's just, I don't mind the guys who make some of those comments, but you assume the worst when, France has a stable enough demographics. The French are having
Mhm.
boatloads of kids. Um, Actually, more kids than the migrants coming in are having, I've noticed, which is a very odd thing.
That's
Um,
that's something that is strange. America, of course, has a ton of migrants too. Um, but after, so the migrant has kids, but their kids have less kids than the native population, and
yeah,
that's a trend across the West. That seems very
yep,
strange to me. Um, I'm
same.
glad to hear that. I'm glad we're having more kids than them. But it's not what you expect when you hear about all these people coming over.
Well, it's also that like they're coming into France, and like I go to the urban sites. I teach in like one urban school, and
Uh-huh.
they've got like two, three kids or four kids sometimes. But like, how do I put it? They're having um, like I also teach at like at two rural schools where the norm is like three to four kids for the native
Yeah.
French. So I get to see the fertility rate of migrants versus French.
Uh-huh.
And actually, even the migrant school I teach at, or the urban school, has quite a few ethnic French in there. Not too many, but it has a few ethnic French. And
Hmm.
at the rural schools, there's one or two, there are some migrant kids in there, but um, the majority is so overwhelmingly native stock that it's like I've got kids who I teach, and it's like, oh, almost every child's like, oh, I have an older brother or I have an older sister, and like, and it's usually the ethnic French. So it's a matter of there are so many kid like the and meeting with some of the parents, it's like they're still working on more kids. And it was like that also in some parts of Japan when I visited. There was just so many kids and
Hmm.
teaching them, and it just got overwhelming. Just how many but my migrant school, the class sizes are like 12 to 20 kids, like maybe 18 kids. About that's the average, like 12 to 18. In the rural schools, it's about 18 to 30 kids. There's one or two classes with 34 kids. So we have to divide the classes for me to just teach English to one group. We have to constantly do that. There's just too many kids. And
Hmm.
that's where, like I said, it's overwhelming, very overwhelming. And so, yeah, like, and the most common given names for the boys are Jules, Charles, and Alexandre. And for girls, it's Camilla, Camilla, and Camilla. I'm joking. No, it's just I have too many Camillas. Um, and I've lost track of the times I've said, "Oh, what's your name?" to a little girl I'm teaching. Camilla is the answer,
Uh-huh.
and I go, "Of course it is."
Yeah.
It's just like, and I work with. I think I work with like two Camillas, so I have coworkers who have
Oh
the
my
name. It's
gosh.
just so damn common for some reason. So, and I have actually at one point said, "Oh, thank you, Camilla," to a coworker, and she said, "No, my name's not Camilla."
Oh,
Oh, I just assumed.
yeah.
It's just, and she's like, "Why did you assume that? It's just such a common name." Yeah, that's okay. It's like the coworker was like, "Yeah, I get that. It is very common here." But um, then we get um, the final book where Turnus and Aeneas agreed to single combat to decide the war. Lavinia is, of course, the prize, and uh, the the condition that Juno gives or wants from Jupiter is that the Trojans will merge with the Latins, adopting names and customs of theirs,
Yeah.
like basically fusing the two cultures together. Which this
Yeah.
entire thing could have been resolved had they done that, had they had that agreement before. But of course, the gods are the
Uh-huh.
last ones to know things in this story. Um, sorry if I'm poking fun at them. Um, now, of course, Aeneas wounds Turnus, who begs for mercy, and Aeneas is overcome with fury and kills him. Um, and like it seems like I guess a fitting end. Um, and I know that there will be some who might say Turnus turned out cowardly for begging for his life, but um, I'm not so sure. Like when you're faced with death, like you're not always, like a lot of men will beg. It's the instinct, and Turnus, I don't like. I don't really hate the guy like you.
No.
It It's
He's
a little more complicated.
very simple. He just to me, he reads like a simple, honorable warrior.
Yeah, and he's not like um, hell. We have to bear in mind Hector kind of begged. Hector begs to be treated with respect and honor.
Uh-huh.
Like um, the the thing is, though, I would argue um, what's most interesting is that um, I will still defend Aeneas and say he's also an honorable man. It's two
Yeah.
honorable men locked in combat when they arguably should not have been. But that darn mother-in-law, um,
Uh-huh.
it's all her fault.
He had to go and meddle.
Yep. Which this is why women shouldn't be involved in politics. I'm joking. I'm joking.
I agree. I'm not
Uh,
joking. I agree.
well, I would argue Livia is an argument for women in politics, but I'm joking here. I don't really care to get. That's an entire debate that I don't care to get into
Uh-huh.
because, yeah. But that being said, yeah, this mother-in-law Amata is an argument for women keeping their noses clear of politics. But as a favor to the ladies, I'll argue that 60% of men should not be involved in politics.
I also
Um,
agree.
uh,
I think
I'm a
universal
monarchist.
suffrage is a great evil. I too am
Mm.
a monarchist of sorts. Um,
It should be only
you know, I
landowners.
there's yeah, I've come up with a bunch of stipulations for it. Again, that's something we can talk about later. That's a fun topic.
Yeah.
Um,
But
I do believe
Aeneas,
Aeneas has like a moment of pause. Like maybe he does spare spare him,
Turnus,
but he sees the belt
the
that he
belt.
looted, and then he enraged kills him.
Yep.
Um, you know, uh, to wrap this up, it's super late for me. I bookmarked this because it's so good. Something Will Durant does better than anyone is sum things up at the end of his chapters, or even in the middle. And I'll read this. I'll read this. That's like
Oh,
four
definitely.
sentences, and then you can give your closing thoughts on it. So Will Durant
Okay.
says, "The real religion of the Aeneid is patriotism, and its greatest god is Rome. The destiny of Rome moves the plot, and all the tribulations of the tale find meaning in the heavy task of establishing the Roman race. Tante mollis erat Romanum condere gentem. The poet is so proud of the empire that he looks with no envy upon the superior culture of the Greeks. Let other peoples transform into living figures, marble and bronze, and chart the courses of the stars. But thou, O Roman, must the peoples rule. Thine art shall be to teach the ways of peace, to spare the humbled and throw down the proud. Nor does Virgil resent the death of the Republic. He knows that class war, not Caesar, killed it. At every stage of his poem, he foreshadows the restorative rule of Augustus, hails it as Saturn's reign returned, and promises him, as reward, admission to the company of the gods. No man ever fulfilled a literary commission more perfectly."
Well said.
Yeah, Durant
Well said.
sums things up the best.
He did. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, wow. Yeah. I think I have to agree with it because um, no one ended up fulfilling his poetic duty as ably as Virgil did.
Yeah.
And that being said, he does presage the later reign and destiny of August, and um, he also captures the glory of Rome, her mission to spread empire without end, but also we see the vision of empire that it's of beauty and frolicking people and of the hunt and of the forest and the mountains and whatnot. Nature plays its role. So at least in the Georgics and whatnot. So Virgil is not a man without a vision for the world, and it's a very Roman vision. And when I say that, I don't mean it as an
Mhm.
insult. I mean it as a compliment. I think the Roman vision of the world is a
Yeah.
beautiful one at its core. The Romans did not wish to destroy the world by conquering it. They wished to organize it, set it in order, but also to live in harmony to an extent with nature, it seems to me. Um, that being said, they were a somewhat urban people to an extent, but they were also a people fascinated by the world around them. And they, um, Virgil was their greatest poet. And there's a reason when he dies, um, he's treated with honor and whatnot, because, look what he accomplished. And as for Aeneas, it I think also in him we find a hero who, as you pointed out earlier, bridges the gap between the pagan heroes of the Homeric epics and the heroes of Christendom, of Christianity. You know what I mean? Like he sits astride the two, and Rome is the god of the story, moving and shaping the plot and pushing it forward and whatnot. And it is the destiny of Rome that um, is the driving force. It is a very important element to the story. Um, at least that's my thoughts
Yeah.
on this one. And I will admit, um, I like Homer, but I've always, might be the French in me, I've always liked the Aeneid more. Um, I don't know why. It's just I like the story and the drama and kind of the ending and whatnot. Not with Turnus, but with just the knowledge that Latin and Latin and Trojan will come together, and we will get from the fusion Rome. Um, but that being said, I do like the Odyssey quite a bit because
Yeah.
that's just um, arguably the Odyssey is like um, the story of Christ before Christ in a way. You know what I mean? Like the returning king setting his house in order. That's basically the story of Christ. But Aeneas, I would argue, is the story of the Christian man in a way, as well as the Roman man. Like
Mhm.
resisting his duty, but having to fulfill it once he realizes the glory of it and the vision of it and whatnot. It's a very, you can see why the Christians loved Virgil, why the medievals, I should say, loved Virgil. He's just,
Mhm.
his Aeneid is perfect for the medieval mind. Um, yeah, so that's my closing thoughts. I love this poem.
Yeah.
It's
Me too.
why I was intent on we have to tell we have to go over this and whatnot because it's such a great poem. But I also
Yeah.
think this poem and Virgil, um, they seem like they had an influence on Augustus and how he was envisioning Rome and whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, it seems like it uh, it inspired Augustus as much as like as anything else might have done. And um, I think it is interesting that uh, we also see another side with the patroning of the arts with Augustus. We see the lover of art and culture and of poetry and music and whatnot. A man who loved art. Like his empire was not a cultureless backwater. He envisioned like his empire was to be one of culture and art and beauty and whatnot. A total contrast to Antonius and Cleopatra, where it was just drinking and drinking and drugs and whoring oneself.
Mhm.
Um, nowhere has there been a bigger contrast um, then you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I know people will say, yeah, but he larked as Heracles on one day and then Dionysus another. There was obviously culture. Yes, but it was mingled with a lot of drinking. Like, you know what I mean? It was just, I don't mind drinking, but like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's a social event, but just drinking for its own sake and whoring for its own sake seems to me pointless. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, like
I agree.
there, if you're going to drink or if you're going to visit a prostitute, there should be a reason. That's my point. But the thing
Uh-huh.
is, with um, with Augustus, though, we see the total contrast. He could drink, he could whore himself, but we also see him, like pouring money onto Virgil and saying, "I want this national epic
Yeah.
and whatnot." And um, I have to say, I wonder on some level if there was maybe some jealousy by some of the other poets towards Virgil, um, for being the favorite, the teacher's pet, so to speak. And I
I'm
think
sure
there
there
might have
was
been,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And I wonder if maybe some of the, uh, well, uh, the others, just the way they wrote was maybe a rebellion against Virgil to an extent and a response because he kind of became the mainstream. But he dies in 20 BC, um, which was a pretty hard time for Augustus. And we are going to get into why that was next time.
Yep.
Perfect
Nice.
cliffhanger moment. Any other thoughts?
No, no, that's it.
Okie doke. Well, I hope everyone will agree to go subscribe to Maverick. His is a great Substack. And um, I don't think I have too many other thoughts. Um, other than go subscribe to him, great Substack, and stay tuned for the next episode, wherein we will tackle the Augustan uh, Golden Age, but also succession issues, which
Yeah,
is an exciting topic.
it is. All right. Thanks, Joe.
No problem.